With bye weeks here, identifying the perfect lineups are becoming more of a headache. Don't panic, we've got you covered with our week 5 wide receiver rankings and tiers to ensure you're not left unhappy come Monday night. We're going to kick it off at the top, the surefire studs you do not even need to think about. Puka Nacua, Ayomanor St. Brown, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Garrett Wilson, Nico Collins, George Pickens, Justin Jefferson, Devontae Adams, and Emeka Egbuka. The one, I guess, new addition to this tier that may be raising some eyebrows, George Pickens, blew up massively last week with the CeeDee Lamb injury and gets a nice juicy matchup this week. So how excited are you about George Pickens this week, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, like this game, and we've got two tier wide receivers going against each other in Garrett Wilson and George Pickens. I think that makes it interesting. I think the Sauce Gardner on George Pickens matchup is going to be very interesting.
Yes.
Like this game has a lot of potential. I mean, it's got a 47-point over-under, which, given that the offenses can be a little up and down, kind of tells you everything you need to know about the defense. I mean, Aaron Glenn definitely hasn't set the world on fire with how the Jets defense is playing right now. The Cowboys defense can't stop anyone, and that tends to drag opponents along. So the Jets are the 7th slowest team in terms of plays per game. The Cowboys are first. The Cowboys are the 6th fastest in seconds per play. The Jets are kind of middle of the table at 17th. But generally, with those kind of stats, you tend to see it lean towards the first, like the team who's faster. So I do believe that this one's going to be a nice pacey game. I think it's going to be a close game. And George Pickens is just really getting used in the way that we kind of talked about with some of the guests we had on through August, where now CeeDee Lamb's out, they've got no choice but to really pepper him and to use him all over the field. And I mean, the man is just fun to watch.
Yeah, he's certainly entertaining. I'm absolutely fascinated by this matchup. I'm really excited about Sauce versus Pickens. I think, I'm intrigued to see whether the Cowboys try to move Pickens into the slot to get away from Sauce. You look at him, he's played 224 snaps so far this year outside corner. He's played 3 in the slot. That's not too dissimilar from George Pickens, who's played 238 snaps out wide and 20 in the slot. So you would expect them to line up against each other the majority of the time. But I think if Sauce Gardner, he's the type of player that likes going up against a guy like George Pickens in terms of he likes bigger, more physical receivers that play outside. He struggles with the kind of jitterbug guys. Maybe if he is having his way in the first half, we see George Pickens moved into slot and see some more creative touches and maybe manufactured touches to get the ball in his hands. But yeah, just from a pure football fan, I'm really, really excited to watch that. Anybody else in this tier that you want to touch on? Perhaps Nico Collins, who had a nice game last week, but it still feels slightly precarious with this whole offense, the way it's functioning.
Well, look, I mean, the Texans, CJ Stroud doesn't operate well under pressure and hasn't really been able to get things going. Well, good news for him, because he plays a team with virtually no pass rush and no cornerbacks who are healthy. Like, I don't know what the Ravens are going to do to try and mitigate CJ Stroud this week, but they are going to have to be very creative with whatever they do. The Ravens, they rank bottom 5 in pressure rate. They've barely had a sack over the last 3 games. I think, they've had 4 sacks on the season. The only team with fewer sacks from them is the Carolina Panthers. Now, that's just not good enough when you look at guys like David Ojabo, and Mike Green, all these guys. Maybe that picks up with Kyle Van Noy back this weekend. But ultimately, CJ Stroud should have the time that he wants to be able to play the way that he wants. This should be a Nico Collins game. I think that it also really sets up very well for Christian Kirk, who we can perhaps touch on quicker later. But the Ravens allow a league-high QBR to slot passes, and they've given up 5 touchdowns to that position. So I think that the Texans in general, you want to be starting their pass catchers, and you generally want to be starting most of them this weekend, and generally you want to start anyone against the Ravens for the foreseeable future.
Hard to argue with any of that. Moving into the A tier, we have got Jamar Chase, Zay Flowers, Deebo Samuel, Keenan Allen, Quinton Johnson, Cortland Sutton, Tatoria McMillan, Michael Pittman, Xavier Worthy, and Jacoby Myers. Tom, we had a very interesting conversation in our members-only Discord about Jamar Chase this morning, talking about how we view him moving forward. I threw out that I'd value him as kind of a mid-wide receiver 2 for the rest of the season, but here we are, here week 5, and he's our wide receiver 10 again. Are you ready to get burnt again?
I sent out an offer this morning of Jamar Chase straight up for Roma Dunze in my home league in typical home league fashion. That hasn't been responded to yet. So, John, if you're watching, click the accept button. But I just, I think it's incredibly difficult to trust Chase. I mean, in the 2 games with Jake Browning, he's at 8.9 points and 7.3 points. The Bengals are going to be consistently a team that we don't know if we're going to get good Jake Browning or bad Jake Browning. And I'm not sure that that's something which a lot of people need the headache of. Like, if you can pivot to something similar instead, then why would you not do it? Against the Lions, who I expect the Lions to win this game comfortably, and I've taken Detroit at minus 10.5. I think I got the line. The Bengals are going to have to pass a lot because they can't run the ball either. So maybe there's reason for optimism there, but I'm struggling with it.
Yeah, I kind of tend to agree and just hope that there's some manufactured touches that find their way and create some fun there. Quinton Johnson's the other guy I want to touch on. Last week, he had a 43.3% targets per route run rate. We're 4 weeks into this breakout. I think it's legit. Like, it's high value touches, it's downfield targets. He looks great with the ball in his hands. He's running better, crisper routes than I've ever seen. And he said he's seeing the ball downfield in the red zone. It's legit. And here he is as a high-end wide receiver 2 in our ranks.
Yeah, well, you kind of look back across this spell to the start of last season. And I mean, he's got 12 touchdowns since the start of last season. But he's also consistently been involved, like going back to week 12 onwards last year. And he's consistently hitting 5 targets as a sort of floor. And that's something which you can't say for guys like Jameson Williams, who there's plenty of hype, and I've bought into the hype this offseason. Jameson Williams would love to have 5 targets a game as a consistent floor. And what Quentin Johnson has done is become the all over, the must make a play type option for Justin Herbert. And Keenan Allen has just slotted right back into reliability. And because of that, it's completely pushed out Ladd McConkey. And right now, I'm not sure I see it changing because for the most part, it's working for them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then final guy I want to touch on, Jacoby Myers, Tom. If you would say to me one guy that is completely under the radar, that I think is seeing the underlying numbers and volume, that he should be hugely outproducing his current production, it's Jacoby Myers. He's someone that I'm trying to buy and acquire in as many leagues as I can. Are you with me in seeing Jacoby Myers as a potential breakout as we move forward in the next few weeks?
Yeah, well, the thing with Jacoby Myers is he's just been quite quiet and under the radar because the Raiders are playing just awful at times. Like Geno Smith, we definitely have been pro Geno Smith, and it's not looking particularly great for us. Where Jacoby Myers is kind of like kept under the radar is because I think he started the season hot with 17.7 points, and then it's tailed off, and he's scored fewer and fewer fantasy points each week. So it's like just as the hype builds, the returns aren't massive. But as you say, the usage is there. And this week he plays against a Colts team that have allowed the 4th most fantasy points to the wide receiver position. So if it's ever going to be, then surely we see a good week this week. I mean, if you see his fantasy points decrease again this week, then it is probably time to worry. But I feel like the Colts are a fun matchup at the minute. They tend to drive teams into good game scripts, and I feel like Jacoby Myers is an easy start.
Absolutely. Before we move into the B tier, though, 64% of you watching this right now are currently not subscribed. Come and join the party. You will not regret it. We are pumping out these rankings videos every single week, as well as Dynasty, Best Ball, and sprinkling some DFS content along the way. The B tier, we kick it off. Marvin Harrison Jr., Chris Olave, Jaylen Waddle, AJ Brown, Lad McConkey, and Brian Thomas. Tom, feels like Jaylen Waddle is going to be the talk of the town given the Tyreek Hill injury. How high would you consider having him rest of season? And do you think that there's an argument he could potentially squeeze into that A tier over the next week or so?
It's tough, and I would really like to see it because Jaylen Waddle's somebody I've been a big fan of. Really think that the talent and the potential is there. We haven't really seen him play many games without Tyreek Hill. Normally, when Tyreek's missed time, it's been at the same sort of time that Jaylen Waddle's missed time. I think in the only career absence I could find where Tyreek was out, I had Waddle at 8 for 142 and a touchdown. So, I mean, if I can get that every week, I'd be more than happy. The Panthers' secondaries played really well this year, though, so I don't think on the road in Carolina this is necessarily a smash spot. It would be very good to see the volume just channel towards Jaylen Waddle, though. The last thing I want to see is Darren Waller seeing all the targets and becoming this year's Jonnu Smith. So, yeah, this is very much kind of show me what you want to be, Miami, and let us adjust from there. But right now, I feel like the B tier and where we've got him feels about right.
Yeah, and then last player I want to touch on this tier, Brian Thomas. Can I give you some positives? It's been pretty bad so far through 4 weeks, but his yards per route run has increased every single week from 0.3 in the first game to 1.69 last week. It was his first game without a drop last week. Maybe this is starting to turn around, and maybe we can start to get excited about Brian Thomas coming back to that rookie season Brian Thomas that we all drafted him to be.
Well, I should hope so. I mean, the Jags really do look like a team that's kind of figuring it out as it goes along. And, that's kind of fair. Like, we forget sometimes for a lot of these teams, they're not playing starters extensively during the offseason. And they are learning a new scheme. And sometimes that does take time. Now, the Chiefs' defense looked great against the Ravens, but they've had Lamar's number for a little while now, so you'd kind of expect that. There's kind of the areas where you can get at the Chiefs' defense typically is play action and screens. They're not particularly good at defending either of those. They've given up, I think it was they give an 84% completion rate on play action, which is the worst in the league at 12.6 yards per attempt. Trevor Lawrence is 12th in passing attempts versus play action, has 3 of his passing touchdowns against it. They allow the 4th highest yards per attempt on screen passes, and Trevor Lawrence is the 2nd most screen passes. Now, those aren't typically areas, screen passes aren't typically areas where Brian Thomas is seeing a lot of work. But maybe we see the play action kind of focus on Brian Thomas and we try to get things going. He does lead the team with 5 targets on play action so far this year, so maybe we can get more Trevor Lawrence play action and really focusing on him. But I'm not massively hopeful on this game. I feel like this is another one that could end up going under its total of 45 points.
Yeah, I think for me with Brian Thomas, I still believe in the talent. I still believe in the player.
Yeah.
And the volume is still there. And at some point, those two things have got to equal fantasy production. So, yeah, call me, an idiot, but I'm ready to go back to the well. And I think there's a chance he could have a good week this week.
Well, with the one thing I know is that doubling down on a Shane Waldron offense never pays off badly.
Moving into our C tier, we have got Jameson Williams, Wan'Dale Robinson, T. Higgins, Khalil Shakir, Devonta Smith, and Jordan Addison. Post Malik Neighbors' injury, Wan'Dale Robinson's average depth of target went from that dizzy heights of the last couple of weeks back to the old, essentially only targets around the line of scrimmage. Tom, are you expecting potentially just a pure PPR scam in Wan'Dale Robinson or anything else?
Yeah, and I think Jackson Dart kind of needs that at the minute, doesn't he? Because we touched on this on the quarterback video, but Jackson Dart wasn't running an NFL offense. It was a lot of quarterback draws, a lot of quarterback scrambles, and they really need to just figure that out as they go along. Now, the matchup against Saints is a perfect one because Saints allow the 12th most passing fantasy points to wide receivers. They've not been particularly strong against the pass. They've allowed the third most points per game, third most yards per game through the pass. And I think that this is going to be fine for Wandale because after Malik Neighbors left the game over the 2 full quarters that they had, he tied Theo Johnson with a 30.8% target share. They wanted things near the line of scrimmage to make life easy on Jackson Dart. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see more of that this week. And in full PPR, I think he's a must start.
Yeah, I guess I'm just nervous that as much as he can have 30+% target share, if Jackson Dart's only going to attempt 22, 25 passes a game, I'm nervous. You look at last week, he saw 5 targets. He saw 4 air yards total on those targets. Like, it is ridiculous. He's going to need probably double-digit targets to be fantasy viable, and that makes me nervous because I don't know if Jackson Dart's going to drop back enough. So for me, I'm probably close to dropping him down a little bit further, I think, when I review my ranks. I think for me, he's probably more of a wide receiver 3 flex play than I'd feel comfortable with him as a wide receiver 2 for sure. If you want your start sit questions answered, get them in the comments below. Tom and I will answer all your start sit questions, all your trade questions. Whenever you answer them, whenever you ask them, Tom and I will get them answered. Moving into the D tier, Stefon Diggs, Keon Coleman, Troy Franklin, Elic, Ayomanor, and Chris Godwin. Tom, let's start at the top. Stefon Diggs felt like the Patriots were easing him in gently as the season started, coming off that ACL tear, and then he exploded with a bang last week. Only 63% of routes, but 38% targets per route run, ended in a 41 overall percent target share. Do you think that Stefon Diggs could be ascending and the wide receiver 1 that this Patriots offense needs?
I mean, yeah, let's give him a little credit. I know that he was well ahead on his ACL recovery compared to guys like Brandon Ayuk, but his ACL recovery was supposed to be clean. So, I think the hopes around him were fairly high. But for a guy his age to come back and be game fit ready and be in a new scheme with a new quarterback, perhaps we were getting a little ahead of our skis. The 16 PPR points last week was absolutely, fantastic to see, because I think otherwise, by the time you get into the bye weeks, people are starting to talk about dropping him. Now, the Bills as a defense, they're a little bit tricky. I can't quite figure out whether they're good or bad. They seem to be up and down is kind of the way I'd describe them. So I wouldn't be worried about starting him this week if you have to. I don't think that we can rely on sort of 16-point weeks every week, but I'm definitely not massively concerned.
You're not buying into the revenge game narrative. Stefon Diggs feels like the petty kind of guy that wants as much production as possible against his former team.
I think maybe he does, but I think also Mike Vrabel and Josh McDaniels probably aren't the kind of people who are going to feed that in expense of trying to win the game.
No, it makes a lot of sense. Moving into our E tier, though, we have got Trey Tucker, Rashid Shaheed, Marquise Brown, Jerry Jeudy, Cooper Kupp, and then Calvin Ridley.
I apologize to anybody who drafted Calvin Ridley on the back of advice from us this year. And look, we weren't the only people. There were plenty of people who thought this set up well for Calvin Ridley, and it should have done. And ultimately, the Titans have been woeful this year compared to what I thought they would be. I thought that the offensive line additions they brought in would be much more competent and much better coached than they've been. I thought Cam Ward would hit the ground running better. And the biggest indictment, though, is just the fact that we've got Elic Ayomanor, who plays well and is just dominating in earning targets, and Cam Ward and Calvin Ridley just do not have that relationship, and I think that should be really worrisome. And I think if we don't see it here, then people are going to start dropping Calvin Ridley. I mean, the Cardinals kind of middle of the table in terms of fantasy production allowed. They're not necessarily a scary team from that point of view, but they're not necessarily a soft matchup either. And I won't be dropping Calvin Ridley no matter how this week goes, but I will very much understand those who do get it right. And just one last aside, Pat, if you're watching, fine, whatever, you win.
I really disappointed with Calvin Ridley. And
Yeah.
the biggest concern was that last week he dropped down to a 54% snap rate. He only ran a route on 42% of pass
Yeah.
plays.
Have they said that he was
But,
banged up? But it's like,
but the thing that I still am maybe leaving the light on for him is that there was still a 23% targets per route run rate. He posted 2.31 yards per route run. Like the underlying numbers per route numbers were great. It's the best he's had this year. So maybe he's coming good. Moving into our F tier, Christian Kirk, Travis Hunter, Darius Slayton, Torrey Horton, Sterling Shepard, Kayshon Boutte, and Cavonte Turpin. Tom, you're very excited about Christian Kirk this week. The floor is yours.
I mean, just play anyone against the Ravens. It's not got to be too deep. The Ravens are gonna bolster a lot of players' stats over the coming weeks. We're gonna make a lot of people think that there are breakouts happening. And it just really comes down to the fact that the Ravens defense is incredibly banged up. They're signing players off the street as of Wednesday, who I would expect to start on Sunday. And as we touched on with Nico, the Ravens allow a league high QB rating to slot passes. They've given up 5 touchdowns there. And Christian Kirk seems to have the trust of CJ Stroud. Yes, last week wasn't as impressive as the first week, but I think that this week is going to be another strong volume week.
Yeah, and then other people after the Malik Neighbors injury are clamoring to go out and grab Darius Slayton. Look, yes, he saw a 20% target share last week, but he still only posted 7.4 fantasy points. For me, Tom, I would much rather go and take a dart throw somewhere else, go and grab a rookie, go and grab Jaden Higgins or something like that, and hope that they emerge rather than slotting Darius Slayton into your lineup. Do you tend to agree?
Yeah, it's hard not to look back at what Darius Slayton did without Malik Neighbors last year, because he had, in the 3 games which he had a team high 122 receiving yards, team high 57 receiving yards, team high 44 receiving yards. Those numbers per our good friend John Daigle. But they came with Jameis Winston. Now Jackson Dart is not Jameis Winston, and that is both a positive and a negative. And Darius Slayton is probably going to be okay, but he's not going to be somebody I would be putting into traditional leagues where you're only starting 3 wide receivers.
Yeah, that is it. Wide receiver ranks in the books. On your way out, make sure you're hitting that hype. Hit the thumbs up. Of course, I hope you already hit the subscribe. Leave us a comment and check out these other videos.